Hey guys, here we go, Chapter 9. Nobody answered Daisy's knock. She could hear the echoes of her knockings inside, so she knew that she would have heard footsteps if someone had been hurrying to answer the door. She knocked again, louder. While she waited to be sure no one was at home, she studied the brown paint on the door. It was a thick reddish-brown color, and in the inset panels you could see brushstrokes. Nobody was there. Daisy swallowed, as much in relief as in disappointment, and turned to face her family. I guess we wait, she said. She sat on the bottom step. They sat behind her and beside her. They had nothing other than what they wore. Even Daisy's map, rain-soaked and ripped, had been lost. Stuart had taken his with him. I thought Aunt Cilla was rich, James said. This isn't a rich person's house. I must have been wrong about that, Daisy said. Mama said she was, James insisted. Then Mama was wrong. Do you think Mama's here? Sammy asked. If she's here, why isn't she here? I don't know, Daisy said. It's a Thursday, a working day, isn't it? So if she's got a job, she'd be there, wouldn't she? What about Aunt Cilla? Isn't she too old to work? James asked. I don't know anything about her except what she wrote in her letters, and that wasn't true. Why would she lie? James asked. I don't know, Daisy said. Daisy? Yeah, Maybeth. Why did Mama go? Daisy looked at Maybeth's round and worried face. She looked down the quiet street where no cars were parked, where all the houses were the same and had the same closed and empty faces. I don't know, Maybeth, but I can tell you what I think. Maybeth waited. I think she got so worried about so many things, about money and us, about what she could do to take care of us, about not being able to do anything to make things better. I think it all piled up inside her so that she just quit. She felt so sad and sorry then, and lost. Remember how she'd go out and not come back for hours? I think she got lost outside those times, the way she was lost inside. Amnesia, James suggested? Maybe. So she decided that she'd ask Aunt Cilla to help us because she couldn't help us anymore. And maybe when she went off into the mall, maybe she'd run out of money and she couldn't take us any farther, and all the things that had piled up inside her head just sort of exploded there. And she just forgot us. Like amnesia, where you forget everything, even who you are. She couldn't stand to think and worry anymore. Everything she thought of, every place she went to, it all looked so sad and hopeless, and she couldn't do anything about it. So it all exploded and left her brain empty. Empty. That was the way Mama had looked those last months, as if she were far away from them. Will she be better now? Sammy asked. Do you think? Maybe she's not even here, James said. She has to be, Sammy said. Why? James asked. Daisy thought of stopping the conversation, but decided not to. Because, Sammy said. Because is no reason, James said. Because if she isn't here, then I don't know where she is. And if she doesn't know where I am, how can she find me? Maybe she doesn't want to find you, or any of us, James said. That's what Daisy said, that she had to get away from us. Mama loves me, Sammy said. His chin stuck out in the stubborn way. Yes, she does, Daisy said, and so do I. Because she did. She loved all of them. That had kind of sneaked up on her over their journey. See, Sammy said to James, I told you. But that doesn't prove anything, James protested. Sammy didn't pay any attention to him. The sun moved slowly across a white sky. At the end of the long summer afternoon, or at the beginning of the long summer evening, the street gradually filled up with traffic, and the sidewalk became crowded with people. One after another, buses stopped at the corner, and a short parade of men and women climbed off. Some carried briefcases, some grocery bags. They walked on, down the street or up the street. Some went up the stoops of the gray houses, pulled out keys, unlocked doors, and went in. Others walked on, around corners, out of sight. No children lived on these streets. The Tillermans silently watched the people move to and fro past them. Nobody looked at them. Most of the men and women walked with their eyes toward the ground or fixed blankly ahead. Sammy moved closer to Daisy and held onto her forearm with his small, tense hand. He did not say a word, but his eyes flicked back and forth. He was looking for Mama. Daisy just watched the people with no particular thought in her mind. She could not do any more. From now on, things would happen to them. She saw men in work shirts with tired shoulders carrying plain black lunch boxes. She saw women in brightly flowered summer dresses, the dresses wilted by the heat as if they were real flowers, the women's faces sagging after the workday. A short, round woman wearing high-heeled shoes walked towards the steps where they sat. She actually looked at them and seemed surprised, but she walked on past them. A man in a green khaki suit carrying a scuffed briefcase stared at them for a minute before he let himself into the house next door. A few minutes later, a woman of the same age as the man, about 50, Dicey guessed, struggled up the steps to the next door house, carrying 2 huge bags of groceries. She noticed the Tillermans just as she pulled the door closed behind her, and her eyes widened. The little round woman in high heels walked past again, from the opposite direction and on the opposite side of the street. She stared at them. She was wearing a plain black cotton dress and had short gray hair that was permanented into sausage-like curls that bounced and jiggled on her round head. She walked as if her feet hurt her, as if she had been standing and walking in the high-heeled shoes all day long. Dicey wondered where she was going. The people coming from work had filled the street for a while now. Now they thinned out, melted away into houses, out of sight. All the sounds were faint ones from distant traffic or from the humming of air conditioners up and down the block. A solitary man wearing shorts and sneakers walked his dog on the opposite side of the street. The round woman came towards them again. This time, as at first, she was on their side of the street and looking at the ground. She held her purse in both hands, protectively close against her side. Dicey thought she must be old. She stopped about 3 feet away and looked at them. At first, only Dicey was looking back at her, into pale blue eyes that blinked behind plastic-framed glasses sitting high up on her nose. She wasn't that old after all, close up. "What do you want?" the woman asked. "What are you doing here? What do you want here?" Her voice was high and a little scared, her lips pursed. Dicey stood up. "We're the Tillermans," she said. She named them all. The woman's expression did not change. Dicey knew then that Mama was not here. Dicey kept on talking. "I'm hoping your aunt, our great-aunt, Mrs. Cilla Logan." Then the woman's expression did change. A little half-smile, a silly, helpless smile, fluttered her mouth. "That is Mother," she said, "not me. I'm her daughter. That is, I was her daughter." She fumbled around in her purse and took out keys. "Mother passed on this last March," she said. Dicey had a sinking feeling in her stomach. "But do come in. There's no need to stand talking on the front stoop." The woman unlocked the door and stepped inside. The Tillermans followed. It was dark and stuffy after the summer evening sunlight. They entered a narrow hallway that led to the rear of the house, past a room with thin curtains, past a narrow dark staircase going up, and went into a kitchen. The kitchen was large enough for all 5 of them, but not big. Sunlight made it brighter than the rest of the house. It was shiny clean. The gray linoleum floor gleamed, the refrigerator shone. The windows, looking over a tiny yard, were polished. There was a formica-top table in the center of the room, and the woman told the Tillermans to sit at the 4 chairs that surrounded it. She opened the windows and the back door, then fetched herself a chair from the front room, putting it beside Maybeth. Before she sat down, she put some water into a kettle, put the kettle on the stove, and took a mug out of a cupboard. As she did this, she spoke to them in starts and stops. "Yes, Mother passed away. You couldn't have known. It was her heart. Her heart was always weak, but we never knew. She wouldn't complain, you see. She was only in her 70s, 72. A wonderful person. Everybody said how wonderful she was. It was a shock to me. I found her when I came back from work, sitting in her chair by the window. A Wednesday it was. We had a high mass for her." She sighed, the kettle whistled, and she poured water into her mug. She dunked a tea bag, in and out, in and out. "I have been not quite the same since Mother went away. People have said that to me. It has been hard for me." She turned to face them, and Dicey saw little tears gathering in her little eyes. She took off her glasses and polished them on a paper towel. The Tillermans sat silent, their mouths clamped shut, not knowing what to say. The woman sat down at the table with them. She sipped at her tea. James looked at Dicey and raised and lowered his eyebrows as Windy had. Dicey smothered a giggle. "And then, of course, to see 4 children on my doorstep. Well, I had no idea. You don't mind, do you? You aren't offended. I was afraid. You hear of such strange things happening these days, especially to women who live alone. I live alone now. I hoped you would go away. If Mother were here, of course." Her voice drifted off, her eyes drifted away from them and out to the windows. Nobody spoke. Finally, the woman gathered herself together with kind of a shake over her whole body. "But what am I thinking of? Are you thirsty? I don't know what I have for children to drink. Living alone, I don't keep much food in the house." "Please," Maybeth said, "I would like a glass of water." The woman looked at her, smiled at Maybeth, and said, "Of course, you all would like a drink of water, wouldn't you? What a pretty child you are. Really, like an angel. I was a pretty child, too. Everyone said so, and we have photographs." She got each of them a jelly glass full of water. Then she drank quickly, and Dicey refilled them, once, twice, 3 times. The woman smiled absently. "What are you doing here?" the woman asked, as if the question had just occurred to her. "Where are your parents? Who did you say you were?" "We are the Tillermans," Dicey said again. She announced all of their names again. "James, Maybeth, Sammy, and I'm Dicey. The woman repeated their names softly to herself. My mother's maiden name was Hackett, she said. Our mother, Dicey began. She looked abruptly at Sammy in case he might be about to interrupt. Is your mother's niece. We used to get a card and letter from your mother every Christmas, and Mama would read it to us. That's how we knew about Aunt Cilla and her address, but I don't even know your name. Eunice Logan, the woman said. Miss Eunice Logan. That makes us cousins, you know. Does it? Yes, because your grandmother was my mother's sister. That means your mother and I are first cousins. Does that make us second cousins? I don't know, Dicey said. Your grandmother would be Abigail Tillerman, Abigail Hackett before she was married. Priscilla Hackett was my mother, you see, before she married. Do we have a grandmother? Dicey asked. Of course, everyone does. But where are your parents? Are they visiting in Bridgeport? Dicey found herself ready to lie again. She could only say they were visiting, and the children had come to meet Aunt Cilla, and then later the Tillermans could go off and do what? If she lied, then she would get herself into a box. They had come such a long way. They had to have some kind of help from this cousin they'd never even heard of before. That was strange, too, that Aunt Cilla had never mentioned a daughter. If Cousin Eunice didn't help them, they would have to go to the police. Dicey had to tell the truth. But first she had to say it to Sammy, say it out loud. Mama's not here, Sammy, Dicey said. He nodded, and tears welled up in his eyes. Dicey reached over and put her hand on top of his. He laid his forehead on his hand and closed his eyes. You don't know where your mother is? No, Dicey said. She ran away, I think. Anyway, she disappeared. We were on our way here to find Aunt Cilla, so we just came along. We hoped she'd be here. Where's your father? He's been gone for years, James said, his voice sharp. You're alone? Cousin Eunice asked. They nodded. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, you poor sweet little things. I don't know what to think. I have to ask advice. Will you excuse me to make a phone call? You're absolutely alone? I don't know what should be done. She hurried out of the room, swinging the door closed behind her. Sammy raised his head and Dicey retrieved her hand, now a little wet. I don't understand, Sammy said. Neither do I, Dicey answered. She'd never heard of us, you know that? And we'd never heard of her. But Mama answered those letters every year. What should we do? James asked. Tell the truth and see what happens, Dicey said. We can't do anything else, can we? James? We could take off again and look out for ourselves until... Until what? Dicey asked. Until we grow up? We could, Dicey agreed. We always might do that, and we'd figure a way out, I guess. But for now I think we shouldn't unless we have to. We don't have any idea where Mama is, and I want to find out. Maybe this cousin Eunice will take care of us. I could work later and pay her back. That's what I'm hoping will happen, just so we're together. Is Mama gone for always? Maybeth asked. I don't know, Dicey said. She might as well be. Don't say that, Sammy cried. Don't you ever. Cousin Eunice returned. My friend, he's an advisor, really. He's my spiritual counselor. He'll be by after supper. We have to get some more food. I only have 2 dinners in the freezer. Dicey, can you go to a store and get 3 TV dinners? I don't know what kind you children prefer. Is that all right? Of course, Dicey said. She flushed and said, We don't have any money. None? None, I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. I feel so sorry for you. I don't understand what has happened. Neither do we, Dicey answered. How could you? You're only children. She reached out her purse and took $10. This will be enough. You must want milk. Children should drink milk. And fruit. Can you decide what you need? Will this be enough? Dicey nodded. The grocer is 2 blocks away, just around a corner. You go up the street, turn right, and you'll see it. But don't talk to strangers. Dicey nodded, lowering her head to hide her smile. And you should call me Eunice. Cousin Eunice, because we're cousins. And you could pick out a cake from the frozen foods. Something light, perhaps lemon. Something that will sit well with tea. Dicey walked to the store, not thinking about anything in particular, just taking it slow. There was a kind of pool of sadness in her heart, she thought, and she wondered why it should be so. Not only for Mama, because she had not expected to find Mama here. She didn't ever expect to see Mama again, she realized. The sadness was for themselves, even though they were much better off now than they had been, say, just last night at this time. Dicey picked out 3 chicken TV dinners and went to the fruit counter. Once again, everything had changed on them. Perhaps it was all this changing that made her sad. Or perhaps the disappointment after finally arriving at Aunt Cilla's house and finding only Eunice there, whom they had never heard of, a stranger who pitied them. Probably she would Probably they could never go back to New Haven. She wished they could have stayed there longer. She wished she knew something more about those two young men. She didn't even know their last names or phone numbers or address. Stuart hadn't even stayed to find out if the Tillermans would be all right. The Tillermans had just drifted through his life, touch in, touch out, and gone without a thought. Daisy paid for her purchases and walked slowly back to the little gray house. Maybe it was just that she was away from the ocean, the salt water with its tides and turbulence, that made her sad. Father Joseph, Cousin Eunice's friend, was a priest, and slender, a restless man with thick gray hair and deep lines in his forehead. He was cool. He had cool, thoughtful, light brown eyes, deep set, and a thin mouth. He wore shiny black trousers and a jacket, a black shirt front, and the band of a white, crisp, and stiff, and the band of white, crisp and stiff around his neck. Cousin Eunice introduced him and fluttered nervously around him on her high-heeled shoes, bringing him a cup of tea and offering him a tray with a little china pitcher of milk and a little china bowl of sugar cubes. Father Joseph did not show pity for the Tillermans as Eunice had. They sat together in the living room on the chairs and the floor. He asked about their home in Provincetown and their school, about Mama, about living in a summer resort area, about the fishing fleet, and about books. After a while, he suggested that the younger children go to bed while he and Cousin Eunice and Daisy made some plans. "But they have no night clothes," Cousin Eunice said. "We can sleep in our underwear," Daisy said. "We washed everything out last night." The priest remarked, "You did? You do seem to have managed well." Daisy took the younger ones upstairs. James protested, but she told him, "We're guests. We're strangers here. She didn't even know we existed, and she's trying to help us. Let's just do as we're told, okay?" James and Sammy went to sleep in the small back bedroom that looked out over the yard, in a double bed. Maybeth would sleep in the other twin bed in Cousin Eunice's room. Maybeth looked small lying there, her curls spread behind her on the pillow, her hands folded over the clean sheets. "You okay, Maybeth?" Daisy asked. The little girl nodded. "I think I liked it better when we all slept in the same place," Daisy said, smiling at her, "like that first night." Maybeth nodded. "I expect I'll be sleeping in with James and Sammy on the floor, or downstairs on the sofa," Daisy said, "if you want me." "It's okay," Maybeth said. "I won't be lonely." "Lonely? All cramped together here in this little house? Why, I'll hear you if you roll over. I'll hear you if you sneeze and come running." Maybeth smiled at Daisy and closed her hazel eyes. Daisy went back downstairs where the adults awaited her in the living room, which was cluttered with the kinds of things collected over a lifetime. Pictures and little china figurines and pillows stuffed with pine needles. Father Joseph greeted her. "Sit down, Daisy. We have to get to business now. That's an odd name, Daisy. What is your real name?" Daisy sat cross-legged on the floor between the two in chairs, looking up at them. "Daisy's my name," she said. "I don't have another name." "You just don't know it," the priest assured her. Daisy didn't argue. After all, maybe he was right. He studied her as if he wanted to see her thoughts. He made her uncomfortable. "Your cousin has agreed to make you welcome here until we can make inquiries about your mother and your father." Daisy looked at Cousin Eunice, who smiled foolishly at her and said, "It must be temporary, I'm afraid, but your cousin has certain plans, of which she may tell you later," Father Joseph said. He smiled at Cousin Eunice across the top of Daisy's head, and she blushed like a little girl. "However, the church has summer activities in which your younger siblings can participate. A day camp for the little boy and the young girl. James will attend a school camp. Will he object to that?" "He likes school," Daisy said. "He's awfully smart." "I thought so," Father Joseph said. "I'm one of the teachers there, so I can see that he gets into the proper classes. And of course there will be more active things to do in the afternoon." "That sounds fine," Daisy said. "Thank you. Thank you both. I know we've just sort of fallen on you," she said to Cousin Eunice. "I'm sorry." "Oh, don't be sorry," Cousin Eunice said, leaning forward, pushing her glasses back up her nose. "We are family, aren't we? And when I think of you all alone, abandoned, like myself, really, in a way, why, I couldn't do anything else, could I? Only I work, you see, so I have to be gone all day, and there will be so much to do with 4 children in the house. Cleaning and shopping, laundry. But I can do that, can't I?" Daisy asked her. "That is what we'd hoped," Father Joseph said. "And the church. Eunice can give you clothing. The church Eunice can give you clothing, as well as all the support we can offer, and counsel. Have the children no other relatives?" "None that I know of," Daisy said. She knew she had interrupted, but she didn't like him talking about them as if she weren't there. "Mother had just one sister," Cousin Eunice said, "Abigail. She would be their grandmother. but I don't know much about her. She was much younger than Mother, 12 years, and they never were very close. I've never met her. They might have had a falling out. I did write to her when Mother passed away, but I received no answer. Was the letter returned to you? No. So it must have been received by someone. Dicey was listening hard. Cousin Eunice waved her little hands. Let me see. Abigail married a man named John Tillerman. Where does she live? Father Joseph asked. In Maryland, down south, on the eastern shore, a town called Crisfield. I don't know anything about it. It is where Mother lived as a girl. Father Joseph nodded. This John Tillerman farmed, I think, I remember. Cousin Eunice wrinkled her brows with the effort. They had children. Dicey nodded her head. I don't know how many, but one daughter would be Dicey's mother. I don't know where they are now. Crisfield, Eastern Shore, Maryland, Dicey said to herself to fix it in her memory. By that time, Mother had been here in the North for years and married to Father, and they lived here. Mother didn't like her sister. She didn't like to be reminded of her family. I don't know. She wouldn't speak of them. She became a part of Father's family. These are the first Hackett relations I've met. I'll try to remember more, Father Joseph. We have photograph albums. That would be most helpful. I myself will see what I can find out about the Tillerman family. Sometimes the church can make the more sensitive personal inquiries that the police authorities can't. He turned to Dicey. What is your religion? I don't know, Dicey said. We never went to church. He frowned slightly. There's another question which I am afraid I have to ask. The matter of your name, Tillerman. That would be your mother's name? Your parents were not married? Dicey shook her head. I don't think so, she said. Cousin Eunice sucked in a noisy breath. Dicey did not look at her. She pulled at the laces of her sneakers as if she had just noticed they were coming loose. Had you the same father, all of you? Would you know that? Yes, Dicey said. Her head snapped up and her eyes met his. He did not seem surprised at her anger. Sammy and Maybeth look like Mama, but James and me, we look like our father. I remember him a little because I'm the oldest. Yes, the priest said, smiling a little. I'm sure you're right. He didn't sound sure. No, you're not, Dicey said, but I am, and I know. Aren't there birth certificates? There have to be, don't there? We were all born in Provincetown. Why don't you call the hospital there? They'll tell you. Mama wasn't. She couldn't find the polite word. She didn't have boyfriends. She didn't even go out on dates. She's nice. She's good. She loves us, and you probably don't believe that either, but she does. We'd know, and you wouldn't. He held up his hands. A smile lifted at the corners of his mouth. Cousin Eunice fluttered in the background, making little protests to tell Dicey she shouldn't talk like that to a priest. No, Eunice, the child is probably right. She would know better than we. Then why did she abandon them? Eunice asked. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say that, she apologized to Dicey. Dicey didn't respond. That is what we'll try to find out, Father Joseph said. I think, Dicey, if you can, I'd like you to speak to the missing persons department. The police? Dicey asked. The police. Dicey thought. She didn't want to talk to the police. But how else could they find out where Mama went? And what if something bad happened to Mama, and the police could help her? And if by not talking to them, Dicey could hurt her? She had a sudden memory of Mama's sad moon face and her sad moon smile in the car window, and then of Mama running to comfort Sammy when he had fallen off a chair and was frightened, pulling the little boy onto her knees and wrapping her arms around him, saying crooning, comforting things. The two round yellow heads bent towards each other, and Mama's strong hands cradled the back of Sammy's little head. Okay, Dicey said. They can't put us into foster homes when we're here with Cousin Eunice, can they? We're not runaways, are we? I don't want us to be separated, she explained to the priest. Neither do we, if it can be helped, he answered. I'll contact the police and someone will come here to see you. Shall I come with him? Okay, Dicey said again. She was thinking furiously, trying to see if there was a trap in this or danger. You really have no choice, the priest said. Dicey nodded with her eyes on his, but she was reciting it to herself. Crisfield, Eastern Shore, Maryland. Father Joseph left then, and Cousin Eunice brought Dicey a cot that she kept in the cellar. Dicey put it into the last of the floor space in the boys' room. Cousin Eunice wanted to object to having Dicey in with the boys, but she didn't want her own room to be crowded, so she didn't say much. Dicey looked in on the sleeping Maybeth before she made her final stop in the bathroom and lay down on her cot. She could hear James breathing softly. Sammy turned and rustled in the sheets. Dicey lay on her back with her arms under her head, staring at the black ceiling. They had come here safely. If this was to be their home, then she could learn to get along here. She would have to. Stuart was right. They had to stay together. That was the only important thing. She was lulled to sleep by the words repeating in her head. Crisfield, Eastern Shore, Maryland. Thanks for listening, guys. Please feel free to give this a thumbs up if you enjoyed. I will be back more than likely tomorrow with chapter 10. And please feel free to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and definitely click the bell icon if you want to be notified about future uploads. Thanks for listening, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.